right, thanks. Glad to be here. So, psychological safety is personally important to me because I've been on a lot of teams where I never experienced this. And so, one of my passions was to bring this to life within the organizations that I've led so that young men like me, that when I went into the workforce, didn't have to experience what I had, which was really kind of a very horrific and difficult situation, and it just didn't need to be. I was working for nonprofits with people who had good intentions to lead well, but we didn't know how to do this. We didn't know the basics of psychological and emotional communication. So the goal is for you guys to be equipped so that when you're around this table, it's like, why should we do these soft skills stuff? So that you can engage with this group of leaders around you and speak to them about the scientific principles and the business case behind this. So you guys go equipped to say why this is so important for our team to engage with. All right, so let's dive in. This is where our story begins, in Africa, appropriately enough. But this is a tragic story. An Ethiopian military aircraft was flying at about 300 feet off the ground, looking for what they were informed was a tragic crash of one of their airplanes. And they were looking everywhere and they couldn't see it. Why? Because it had been so destroyed that it had been atomized into small bits that they couldn't even see from 100 feet off the ground. But where does this story really begin? This story really begins with a phone call from American Airlines to Boeing, of all things. Nothing to do with Ethiopia. And American Airlines is calling up their Boeing rep and they're saying, hey, we want to buy another 400 of your 737s. The Boeing guy is like, that's excellent, great, good choice. The only problem is we're actually going to buy them from Airbus because Airbus has a plane that's 10% more efficient. And the Boeing guy says, well, yeah, we're working on that. We have a plan to make our planes 10% more efficient. We have these great big GE engines we're going to put on there, and it's going to be, okay, said the American Airlines guy. We'll buy those airplanes, but they need to be ready in 2 years. Oh, and one more thing. We can't retrain our pilots on this. There has to be the same pilot training so that we don't have to retrain anyone. We'll see you in 2 years. Click. 400 planes. And so Boeing was set on a course to create something that was not finished and deliver it to American Airlines and airlines all over the world. But what transpired was tragic. It led to an Ethiopian Airlines pilot taking off on a bright sunny day, somebody who had been trained on the 737 to fly it, and he had 8,000 hours of experience. He was an experienced pilot. But not 8 minutes into the flight, he started experiencing an out-of-control moment where the airline was going hypersonic into the ground and out of control. He was trying to correct what his training had trained him to do, but to no avail. And tragically, the plane crashed into the ground, going over 600 miles an hour, obliterating all hands, all this loss of life. Why? Because a group of 6 engineers around a Boeing table couldn't tell their managers that the software wasn't quite ready. Because you see, to achieve this feat of 10% more efficient, they had to put these giant engines on the planes. And if you know planes, they all have wings and tails, right? And they're all put in the same place all the time because they balance each other out. So when the plane flies, it goes straight. The pilot doesn't have to do anything to make it do that. But they had to move the wings up and higher to put these big engines in it, so it made the plane flying down all the time. No problem, said the engineers. We can put software in there and do it. The software will correct 1,000 times a minute to keep the plane going straight ahead. But that's a software feat that they hadn't finished yet. But they knew they had to. But by the demeanor of their supervisors, their managers, they knew that the only answer they could give was, yes, the software is running fine. Yes, everything is on schedule. Yes, it will be ready on time. There was no communication that said to them, you know, you guys aren't supposed to report anything to us except for the words that we want to hear. Those words were never spoken in English to those managers. What was spoken was eyebrows furrowed, tone of voice lowered. Seriousness, fear on the face of their managers. Emotional communication that was imbibed by those engineers. These are principled people. Engineers are trained to save lives. That's why they exist, to create machines and bridges and things that hold people safely to their specifications. Numbers people, ethical men. What shut off their brains? That they were able to basically say, yes, this is working, when they knew it was no. Something shut their brains down, so they made this tragic decision that ended up here. CEO Dennis Mullberg, before Congress. He was the darling of Wall Street. For years, he was going to change Boeing and the world, and he was doing great until these planes, Indonesia, Addis Ababa, flying into the ground. Why are these planes falling out of the sky? Why are the thousands of planes that you sold suddenly grounded? He had no answers. It was due to the psychologically unsafe environment that Boeing had created with those managers that this product went out the door unsafe. He was fired. Nearly $1 trillion in losses. Now, if that doesn't affect the bottom line because of psychological safety for 5 managers around a table, what does? 30,000 layoffs. That's not an HR nightmare. I don't know what is. You imagine trying to rehire all those people, 50% stock loss, and then worst of all, their product killed 342 people unnecessarily. So that's where it ended up. So psychological safety is a serious endeavor in every organization. And you, in this room, might be the people that can make the difference between what happened here and what happens in the front line. Then there's this, Volkswagen. You may have heard of Dieselgate. And where did this happen? How did this happen? It happened with this powerful-looking German man named Herr Winterkorn. He liked to rule with fear and power and control, so that when he entered the room, furrowed brows, lowered voice, "You will do what I say." And he commanded his presence and with fear. So he too set a goal that was, we will become the #1 auto manufacturer in the world. And they were very close to doing it. So the key to doing this, he said, is to create clean diesel that will pass the California standards. And so he, again, tasked his engineers with that singular task. Do this at all costs. You have to do this. And he never communicated in German to them that you cannot do this. You cannot tell me that this is not capable of being done. Those words were never said. He communicated it with his emotional demeanor. He communicated that to the managers of these engineers, that there was no alternative option. Fear was communicated emotionally from manager to engineer. And they were stuck. But what did one brilliant engineer come up with? He said, you know, when the car is on the testing pad, the back wheels, they do not move. So we can program the computer to lower the emissions and the power output, but no one will know. We will pass the test. And that's what they did. So they committed commercial fraud on a massive scale in order to pass that test. And they did. And they got away with it for 2 or 3 years until suddenly it was discovered what was happening. And then this. This is Herr Winterkorn now, wishing that he had taken the course on emotional communication. $150 million euro judgment against him personally. He's a fugitive from justice in the United States. If this CEO steps foot on this continent, he will be arrested and tried for commercial fraud. He's a fugitive from justice. $30 billion in legal fees, 50% stock loss, commercial fraud, fired again. And why? Because the emotional communication that he used shut down ethical, principled German engineers who usually are fixated on the numbers and doing things correctly. What happened to the neurology of those engineers to cause this? So is it important? It's important to your organizations. So psychological danger, definition, a culture where people feel emotionally threatened and act in self-protective ways. And we'll see what this does to us as human beings in a second. It causes an emotional current. Now, y'all's from Missouri. I don't have to explain this to y'all. You guys know about float trips, right? Whenever I speak elsewhere, I got to explain float trips. So when we go on float trips, what do? We get our beer, we get our floaty thing, and we go in the current and we let it take us down the river, right? That's what emotional current is. You never see guys paddling with their beer up the river. We never do that. Why? Because it takes energy. It takes a lot of energy to paddle against the current. So when that emotional current happens, people move in that direction naturally. So Mollberg from Boeing was causing a current to happen, and the managers and the engineers were being swept along in that current. It's an emotional current. It's not one communicated with words, it's communicated by emotional strength. Herr Winterkorn, the same thing, created a current of emotional strength. It's like, if you come this way against us, you will experience danger. Danger, threat. So people went away from it. People move in whatever emotional current you create within your organization. What is psychological safety? Psychological safety is a culture where people feel valued. So they live out of values and not out of fear. You're creating a culture of freedom where people can move towards their values. And you're creating a place for those values where, yeah, your job might be difficult, but your people know how to surf that difficulty, that cultural current, into exactly where they're going. And when you get good at this emotional task, you can not only just paddle against it, you can paddle with it. Imagine the multiplicity of energy and power that's there. And this isn't just woo-woo power, this is actual physical energy that gets released in the human brain and body. When they feel freedom to work in values and they feel valued, my organization is called VP Culture. It's about valuing people cultures. When they feel that, they will move naturally in that direction, uninhibited and with extra strength and vigor. Amy Edmondson discovered this principle about emotional communication, psychological safety, in a study in Boston. She's a Harvard researcher. So about 25 years ago, she started this research in the medical centers in Boston. And she came up with a test where she could test and see which team, always centered around teams and leaders, were psychologically safe. Because the leader in each group will determine whether they're safe or not. Okay? Not the corporate principles on the wall, that's important. But it's leader up, not just leader down. So she tested the teams, found which teams which were psychologically safe and which ones were psychologically unsafe. They had an unsafe current. And she tested their quality outcomes. And she found out that the people with the unsafe cultures did better. She's like, wait, what? How are they doing better? And then she looked through her methodology and her research and she saw, oh, they're self-reporting. Oh. So she sent a secret researcher behind them. The next time she did the research, she redid all the research, and she found that the numbers were actually reversed. The psychologically unsafe teams were falsifying the data. The psychologically safe team were actually accurately reporting the data, and it was better than the other teams. How many people work in healthcare here? Are healthcare people principled? Do they not swear an oath to protect and uphold? Most nurses that I know have every intention. They will fight for the health and well-being of their patient. They would never intentionally lie about quality outcomes because that might endanger the patient. But here they are, again, principled people, dedicated towards safety, deceiving their managers intentionally. Why? What happened? Well, she found out that when it's not psychologically safe, a portion of your brain goes offline. Your ethical portion of your brain in your executive center is so terrified it goes offline. And you begin to create those kind of errors within your system. And so she found that the opposite was true, that in the psychologically safe team, they felt full liberty to practice their values and integrity. And so what did they do? They practiced, this is exactly what's going on. Here are the places we need to improve. You know, I made a mistake, and this, how can we improve? And so what did she find? She found that it increases all sorts of learning, engagement, performance. Why? Because there's no fear. Every human being is going to create mistakes and errors. Every entrepreneur learns by failure, not just by success. And without that atmosphere, there's no forward motion. So which team do you feel like is going to be more successful financially, in retaining their employees, in energizing their employees, creating better outcomes? According to Amy Edmondson, it's going to be the psychologically safe teams. Google repeated this with a different kind of research within the Google sphere. They reported on, they did 2 years of research doing googly things with all their Google data, researching team after team, 180 teams over 2 years. And here's our chief researcher, Julie Rozvosky. She said so they tested 5 different areas. Which one would win? Would it be most important to have clear goals? Like, we'll become the #1 automaker in the world? Is that the best? Dependability, meaning, impact, education? You know what won? Psychological safety. Those teams, a Harvard team over here, state school team over here, state school team with psychological safety will win every single time. Because they can innovate, they can learn, they can grow, they can get stuff done. So it's amazing, these test after test. A German study says it makes processes work. Of course it does. Innovation study, increased innovation, quality initiatives in hospital, fewer medical errors. Manufacturing, it's key for better processes, again and again. Now if we open up the brain and see what happens inside, okay? So your brain is this little pointy thing. You didn't know that, right? But according to Dr. Bruce Perry, it's state dependent. Now what does that mean? It's dependent on the emotional circumstance of the world around you. Your brain is 2% of your body, but it uses 20% of your energy. 20% of your energy to make it fire. So when your brain perceives value, things are safe. Psychological safety. In that safety realm, it says there's enough energy for us to use that extra bonus energy for your cerebral cortex, which is your most powerful part of your brain. Your executive function, your ethics, your decision making, your future planning, your creativity. Does anybody want one of those things in your teams? Essential for your workplace to function. Your full brain has to come online. When it feels valued, it will feel safe and operate at 100%. The limbic system is the next system down, and it is tasked with searching for danger. When there is psychologically unsafe danger, boom, it triggers a cascade of events. It triggers the diencephalon, which is like the router of the body. It releases hormones. It sends electrical signals. It gears your body to fight and flee. It triggers the brainstem. It changes the amount of sugar. It changes where it's going. It'll shut down your digestive system. It'll amp up your heart, your lungs, and get your system going when there is something like alert, alarm, fear, terror. Your body reacts, your brain reacts, shutting down critical portions of your brain, and turning on the limbs in your system ready to fight and flight. And this is what happens to your IQ. It goes from full intelligence down to a place where the Army can't even train you to lick an envelope and put a stamp on it. You're just trying to survive. And that's what a super toxic culture looks like. But usually most of us, according to Gallup, about 70% of us are operating somewhere in this realm. Because 70% of your leaders do not know how to do this. This is a skill. This is a skill, not just and what happens there is that all of those chemicals will push you down into a steady state of that. That's why cultures will have a current that persists. And it's built on a team level. Okay, Amy Edmondson, when she did her research, it was all based on team level. That team leader created fear, created their own microcurrent. It wasn't that the CEO alone was creating that microcurrent. Even in Boeing, even in Volkswagen, it was transmitted down for sure. But it was ultimately that the manager of those engineers that was transmitting that fear. We actually transmit it person to person, face to face. We are networked human beings. AI will never take this over. Human networking is done face to face, emotional connection to emotional connection. It's built on the team level. So Marcus Buckingham has done tons of research, and Cisco, he says team variation is greater than corporate. So you've got two corporations, A and B. The teams within those corporations will show more variation than A to B. 70% depends on the front line leaders, according to Gallup. And then this is a really interesting anecdotal story. Navy SEALs Jocko Wilkinson, maybe follow him on the internet. He's a big guy. He's like, we crushed leadership. You know, he talks like that. So they would take, on the BUDS training, the SEALs training, they would have to have like a 200 pound rubber boat on their heads, 5 guys running down the beach in the sand, competing against other SEAL teams, running down the beach in the sand, and then they throw it in the water, row 2 miles out in the sea, come back, run back across the beach, and they would compete again and again and again to see which one would win. And they would switch the losing leader with the winning leader, and the losing team would start to win, and the winning team would start to lose. Same biceps, same triceps, same guys suddenly became losers because of the energy that one leader would bring. Powerful example of how it's leadership transmission. Okay, we're going to do a little leadership exercise here with you. So make a mental list of people that range from closest people in your life, like your kids, your grandkids, your friends, your acquaintances, all the way down to enemy. So make a mental list, and then we're going to put them on a scale. So if you feel valued and safety, you can lead. So this is you, with a haircut like me, and these are the people closest to you. So when someone close to you asks you for a favor or something to do you say, well, who's in charge here? Who's got more power? No, you just do it. You exchange favors and activities. You'll write checks for your kids. You'll send them. You'll send your life savings to them. Your mother, your parents, your closest friends. It's like it's there. And then the next level out, close friends. Your close friends. Hey, can I borrow your $50,000 truck to move something across the street? Yeah, sure. Here's the keys. I'll help you out. Can you take me to the airport? Yeah, sure. I'm there. Your acquaintances, so that friendly person that you say hi to at the gym, can you ask them to, hey, can I borrow your truck? They'd be like, no. They'll be, I hope you have a nice day, politeness, that all gets exchanged. But you're suddenly, because there's less valuing, less connecting, there's less automaticity and I will follow you and do things for you. Enemies, and unfortunately, these are mostly people who had power over you. Mostly people who had power over you that you were angry with. I had bosses like this, and I would just do it with gritted teeth. I will comply, but just barely, because I have to. But I don't like it. I don't like you telling me to do anything, because we feel disconnected. So that's a principle of leadership. And so VP culture is based on these. If you heard me this morning, I was talking about personality science. Emotional science is how we do this in the present. It's presentness communication. Personality science is dealing with you in your past. Emotional science is what culture I'm creating, what current I'm creating in the present. I show up in the present with a certain emotional state, and that gets communicated to you in the present. And we have to be able to do this back and forth together in the present. And if I can do that with you, you will feel felt. You will feel empathy, you will feel my connection with you, and you will follow. We will follow each other with ease and with connection. And then value science is something I'm not connecting with here, but it's the future. Mapping a future together. So this is probably what Volkswagen and even Boeing looked like. Smiling faces. There's nurses reporting the outcomes. How are the outcomes, quality outcomes? Everything is fine. Smile face. But what's really going on behind the scenes are all these emotions that they're trying to hide. You know, Deming used to say, just leave your emotions at home in the 1950s. That's not something we deal with at work. But we can't do that. So an unsafe leader will look like this. Dr. Erickson comes, you hear him even outside the door. He's yelling at the scrub-in nurse. Where is this? You know, I have 16 other surgeries to do today. I have so much to do today. I don't have time for you to not be here. And the team inside is hearing this going on outside. What are you hearing? You're hearing elevated voice, lowered voice, volume up, beyond normal, tone lower. When he comes in the room, eyes narrowed. The emotional communication is already, the current is already seeping under that door, coming into the room. When he comes in, he's not looking at anyone. You feel it. And he says, we're not going to do our safety huddle. Those are for, we don't have time for that today. We have to get rolling. We're going to use this new antibiotic that my rep brought me last week. This is going to be very effective, more effective than our previous antibiotic. And Tina, the chief nurse, says, but you know, I just read, and he looks at her, just with a look, and she stops. What did that moment communicate? You're not safe to move forward. I will cut you off if you say another word. And she felt it. She stopped. She was going to say that I just read in The Lancet that this antibiotic with this patient's presentation could lead to anaphylactic shock. She stopped. They started with the procedure. 2 minutes into the procedure, the anesthesiologist is reporting the patient is going into anaphylactic shock. And he worked with her and barely saved that patient's life. And they rolled out of that surgery room and she was furious. Tina couldn't eat for the rest of that week. She felt like she was going to throw up when she left there. Why? Because she was shut down and she just about saw somebody die because of the emotional current that that leader in that room created was so powerful. That's what an unsafe leader can do and has done time after time. So what's an emotional science? I utilize the modality of ACT. ACT is emotional commitment technique. Okay? So ACT has been used in organizations for over 30 years and been studied. It's a shift of trying to control emotions to perceiving emotions, perception on emotion. We'll see why that shift is so critical. It's not about being reactive to emotions, not being like giving full vent to them, like we're all going to go over here and cry, we're all going to go scream. No, we're going to notice that I'm angry. Notice that I'm feeling sad. I've noticed that I'm feeling something, and being intelligent about it, being able to name it, express it intelligently, express it in coordination with my values. We'll see how this works. It gives us freedom to act out of our values despite fear, despite anger, and despite all other emotional things. Emotions are usually powerful indicators that there's something going wrong. Okay, it's about operating in the present. So here's the ACT approach. You have an emotional event, and then boom. It could be, say, we missed the delivery deadline. Oh no, the client didn't get the product at the promised date. That's an emotional event. So the manager gets upset, the whole team is upset, they hear it coming down from the grapevine that the leaders are upset, and so everyone starts to get reactive. I can't identify my emotions, we're just all caught up in them. We can't help others. That leader is just going to be blaming and forcing other people to like, oh, it was all my team's fault, heads will roll. And then there's no discussions, it's just blaming and some sort of like, maybe he's not going to show his emotions, but you can tell. Again, eyes furrowed, voice lowered, staccatic. Who did this? How did this happen? Sarah, why is this late? Why? You notice that when you're in a stadium full of people that everyone goes, boo. They don't go, boo, because they're trying to communicate to the referee that they're in danger. Boo. So we all furrow our brows and give in a low voice. And how do you speak to a small child? Hi, how you doing? Oh, you're such a good baby. And your eyes go up and they open up. So there's a physiological way to communicate emotional content that's hardwired. You can't not do it the other way around. It's universal. So there's no discussion, just deep emotional communication. You're hiding the failure. No innovation is going to happen because it's just going to repeat and everyone's going to run and hide, just like the nurses, just like the engineers we discussed, and everyone's going to feel fear and they're going to go home with that pit in their stomach, and the cultural current is going to leap up and push them away from that leader even more powerfully than before, and push them away and turn off that ethical and variation system that we so covet in our workplaces. Okay? But if we have perspective on emotions, what is that going to look like? In perspective, we can build this. Same event, same emotional circumstances, but the smart, psychologically safe manager goes, wow, I feel ashamed. I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling fear. What's my boss going to say? What's the client going to say? But she identifies all of that. She goes, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. Probably my team's going to start feeling that too. So hey, team, this is not a, how you guys doing? This is not a happy time in our team, and we could say, yeah, not happy. So, you give it a moment. So what are we going to do? What happened here? No one's heads are going to roll here. How are we going to learn from this? So I can help others. We can start having open discussions. We can start saying, we always assume that the vendor is going to deliver on their same 2-week schedule, but there's nothing binding them to that. There's no contract. They just got behind. And they didn't tell us, and we didn't ask. It just always comes in. We assumed. Oh, okay. We made an assumption. Let's communicate that up, and we're going to learn from the failure, and we'll communicate with the client. There's a hard deadline on this one. The vendor needs to know, and so we'll communicate, and then that will probably solve the problem. So we can innovate. And then, despite the fact that we had this moment, we came through it. And now, you know what? I actually trust that leader more. They took us through the darkness, and we were okay. We wrestled with it, and we're okay. Perspective, and we moved it through our values. We kept that part of our brain online, despite feeling the emotion. So that's the difference. This is the powerful methodology. We move from reactivity to perspective. So let's learn what emotions are, okay? There's 2 components to emotions. And most people don't ever understand this. They're just that amorphous blob. But as psychologists, it contains 2 things: bodily feelings and rational thoughts, cognitive thoughts. So the 2 combine to make emotions. So we're going to do a little experiment here with our hands. So you put down your pens a second and wiggle your fingers. All right, so pretend you get an email from your boss. It says, come to my office. And it's maybe in all caps. And you're like, oh no, what does that mean? So you start to feel bodily feelings first. Your heart starts to race. Oh no, this is not going to be. And then you have this cognitive thought, I'm going to get fired. This is not good. So they come together, and let's pretend fear is written on your hands now. And where is that fear initially? Boom, up here, and you're like, no, come to my office, that can't be good, I feel horrible, how do I escape from this? But what does ACT say? Well, we need to gain some perspective. So if I went in the office like this, I'd be like, Sarah did it, marketing did it, I don't know, blame everybody else, you did this. But if I have perspective, I can move out and go, whew, my body is really activated right now, I got to give myself some grace and calm down. I'm not going to rush into that office. I got to give myself time, because all that activity from the diencephalon is making me run. So give myself grace, 20 minutes at least, if I can. Rest. Name that emotion. Fear. I'm feeling fear. But I have values too, so I can start using my brain to say, in the past, if I've done something wrong, I'm going to just own it. That's me. I own what I did wrong. I'll go in there, like if I did something wrong, I'll own it. I'll take the consequences. I won't have to run in fear. I won't have to lie. That's not me. So I go in with my perspective and I go, yeah, you wanted to see me? And she says, oh, I had some tickets from corporate. And you're like, why did you put a smiley face at the end of your email? Or tell me you had tickets for me. So that's what perspective can be. Okay, we gain perspective. So let's look at emotional thinking. Here's one of the fallacies. that Deming had. Remember that initial thing with the happy faces? You can control your emotions. This is what the psychologically unsafe teams and the Herr Winterkorns are thinking. You can control your emotions. Just stop it. Okay, just shut that off. But you can't. Okay? So cognitive thinking here, emotional thinking. So what I want you to do is to not think for the next 30 seconds. Ready? Go. 1. No thinking. I saw you thinking. Did anybody not think, even for those 15 seconds? No, I've never had anyone in the crowd go, I didn't think. Well, how did you know? So we can't shut off our thoughts. We have over 50,000 thoughts, and most of them are generated by your subcortical thought, not by your executive functions. So those subcortical systems are pushing thoughts up into your brain so that you will remember things. So that you will think it does all the hard work and heavy lifting and sorts things out and shoves it up into your conscious thought. Okay, so don't think about polar bears for the next 10 seconds. Ready? Go. Okay, anybody not think about polar bears? Usually I get one guru who's like, I meditated the entire time. It's like, bravo, So you can focus your brain away from it, but it takes effort. You don't have complete control of your thought life. Your subcortical system is very powerful. It takes up 90% of your brain energy, and it's constantly controlling the thought process. So you have to have a relationship with your own mind and your own thoughts that is different than I will control them. You say, oh, there's a thought, and we'll look what that looks like. Instead of being pushed around by thoughts, we have perspective. One of the exercises they say in ACT is like to pretend your thoughts are just like written on leaves and floating down the water. Like they use this for people even in panic situations, panic attacks. It's like, well, there's a thought. Nobody has the same thought forever because your subcortical system moves on. It's usually like, oh, this afternoon. Oh, I got to pick up the kids. Oh, is there gas in the car? Did my husband put gas in the car? Gas in the car. The gas prices are going up. And then, you see how your brain works. It's generally how it works. So it's more like thought surfing than thought control. You're going, oh, there's another one. That's one I'll let go. That's what I want to focus over here. And eventually what we do is we teach leaders how to enhance their focus. Not control, their focus. Because you're always going to wander, but you bring your mind back. And there's 2 different techniques that I don't have time to go into today, but is in my broader courses that I teach. Emotional feelings. Can you control your feelings? Here's another lie. So everybody stand up. Get a little exercise here. So if you can't, stand on one foot. And then if you're really good, stand on your toes. And you'll notice it gets even harder, okay? All right. So you can put your feet down now. What did you notice? Did anybody notice how your brain was telling your foot, okay, little toe, come on, little toe, big toe, little toe, calf muscle, blood down there, blood down there, blood down. Anybody think that? No. No one thinks that. The only conscious decision you made was stand on one foot, stand on toes. That was the executive function. The rest was subcortical. In fact, the muscles in your legs were doing most of the thinking. When you go to the doctor and they do that little reflex test, did you think, oh, I think I'll kick my knee now? No, your leg just does it. And you're like, that's weird. That's the way your nervous system, because if you had to think about it, you'd fall over. It's too slow. So you have all these subcortical systems that run at 2 nanoseconds. The executive function, 6. So the executive function is like, what's going on down there? Oh, look, we're falling over. It's too slow to keep up with most of the emergency systems in your body. So the subcortical feelings are going to set you off. So go ahead, sit down. So I want you to get in touch with your bodies again, okay? So just notice your feet on the ground and you're sitting. Take a deep breath in and then let it out. And just calm yourself and notice how you're feeling calm. Another deep breath in. Stop! So how did that feel? Did you notice your eyes come open? Your sense of relaxation go down? It's another autonomic response. People cannot control If there was a big loud explosion over there, all of our heads would turn. It's autonomic. So this is the whole point of this, is that there's all sorts of things that will push you around and that you cannot control. And I'll show you what we really need to do as leaders. So can I have your assistance? This won't be anything horrible. I'm going to stand on my toes now, okay? So I need you to just... So what happened?
You're doing great.
I'm doing balance. But did you apply a lot of pressure and hold me and balance me? So that's the visual perspective of what we do as leaders emotionally, okay? You can, when someone else is like giving space for you, holding you, you don't actually physically have to hold the hands of your people. You emotionally do that. It's like, so wow. Like you do this with your kids. Like, whoo, wow, that hurt, didn't it? But it's going to be okay. You know. So usually you identify with them like, oh, that hurt. It'll be okay. And then then what does the baby do usually? You know, and they release all of that energy. And then, oh, it's okay. And they go away. So we're not babies anymore, but we do need, like in that situation, we missed the deadline. The manager comes in and holds space. This is going to be hard. We're going to experience pain. Let's all do this together. Ouch. You know, we don't do it like that. We'll say, yeah, that was frustrating. Oh, man, I feel scared. Yeah, what's going to happen? It's going to be okay. Because the manager's already done this for themselves, so they do some of the hard work ahead of time, so that they don't come in freaked out and yelling at people. They've already noticed the fear, named the fear, said this is going to be hard for us, team. Let's go through it together. Everyone holds space for each other, and then we get to the other side and we can move on. Okay, so that's how powerful this can be when done correctly. So that is the science of emotional science, and what does that look like? So instead of the other scenario, you hear Dr. Johnson, he's coming in and he's talking to the scrubbing nurse like, how's your kids doing? Notice the voice is different? How's your kids doing? His eyebrows are probably up. Oh, they're doing fine. Did he get into the school he was looking for? Remembers her name, remembers something personal. Yeah, he did, it was really good. Oh, that's awesome. Comes in, okay team, we're gonna have our safety huddle. He encourages connection. And we're going to have our safety huddle, and we're going to use this new antibiotic that I just discovered. It's going to be really great. My rep brought it in last week. Again, Tina speaks up, and she goes, you know, I was reading in the Lancet, and again, the doctor narrows his eyebrows and looks at her, but he catches it. Because what was he feeling? He was like, ooh, ego moment. I'm supposed to read those journals, not her. Ego moment. And then he realizes that she stopped. And then he goes, no, go ahead. And he lightens his face. Go ahead. And she continues. Yeah, I read in Lancet that they've actually seen this to have negative interactions with this kind of presentation. I think we should use the more traditional antibiotic. Okay, noted. Okay, let's do that. Instructs the anesthesiologist to go get the more traditional antibiotic. They go through the surgery, everything is fine. They wheel out the patient. And Tina says, thank you. And Dr. Johnson says, no, thank you. You probably saved the life of this patient. And they had a moment, they had a connection there. Because she saw what he did. You know, it's not that he didn't feel his ego go, ooh, I'm supposed to be the leader here. But then he caught it and communicated emotionally that it's okay for her to do that. Okay, it's safe. Even for me to have an unsafe emotion for a second, I'll let go. I can get over that. I have perspective, and I can move on. So what are the financial outcomes? They're huge. This emotional communication is our first language that everyone speaks. So we can get all of these statistics going up, 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 up. And why is that? There have been studies that show that if you have two executives, both have PhDs, both PhD in engineering, and same, their output is going to be very similar. This one has emotional intelligence. He's going to increase the output of his team by at least 20%. Or she is going to increase the output of her team by 20%. Because of that one factor. And this is in the STEM fields. Engineering, finance, medicine. This isn't in like social work, psychology, This is in STEM fields where this type of interaction makes your employees that much more productive. So what does this look like for Cynthia Carroll? Cynthia Carroll confronted a situation that was in desperate need. She's the CEO of Anglo-American Mines. She just became the CEO in 2007, and when she began to become the CEO, she was introduced in one of her early meetings, like, oh, we're going through the statistics of what's going on in the mines here, Lars. All right, first page here in South Africa, we've got our platinum mines, and 50 people died there. We got our gold mines there, and then 150 people died there, and we've got $8 billion in production, blah, blah, blah. She's like, wait, what did you say there? How many people died? 200, Lars. It happens. It's mining. What do you expect? It's been happening for decades, centuries. It's what we do in mining. People die. It's the cost of business. She's not anymore. We're going to stop this. What are you going to do, Lars? Shut down the mine? So she did. Lars, that's $8 million a day in platinum production. She didn't care. She stopped the mine, and then she gave emotional current connection. We're going to stop the deaths. We're going to change things. Managers, you have meetings with your meetings and find out when, why, and how this is happening. And soon they came to know it happens at the end of our shifts when we're tired. It happens when we don't have this equipment installed properly. It happens when we don't have this, when these conditions are present. So they were able to emotionally, instead of the emotional communication, you will keep digging at all costs, it's shifted to, you are now having permission to enter into safety. And she was able to turn that around so that they had almost 0 deaths in those mines going forward. And she got it down to 0. And what happened to their profits? She not only made up for that $8 million a day that they lost, but surpassed it in 2 years. They were making more money than they had in the past, and losing 0 lives doing it. Not only creating emotional safety, but physical safety as well. Because obviously that doesn't communicate a lot of safety when you allow people to die. Most of us don't have life or death situations. Some of us do. Some of us are medical. Some of us are critical engineering skills. This is serious business. We do not want our employees' brains going offline, their ethical systems going offline. This is why it's so critical. And not only that, I entered this not just so that I wouldn't go offline, but that so I could go home without that feeling in my gut like I was just pushed to a place that I didn't want to go. And that's what happens to so many employees. And so many 20-year-olds enter the workforce, and they're taught early on with a gut punch of emotional disconnection. And this is where it happens. Just about every employee you could see, they've been gut punched. And they've shut down. They no longer trust. They no longer feel safe. And they no longer come with the same energy that they had previously. It's because a manager, a frontline leader, didn't know how to create psychological safety. And you, like Cynthia, can turn this around by instituting skills training in this area. People can learn the skill of positive, safe, emotional communication, so that when you end up in your boardrooms, in your executive meetings as an HR personnel, and why are these numbers down? Should we push them some more? Well, maybe there's a whole different avenue of psychological safety that you now have the numbers and the case studies to back up why this type of education and skills training in your organization is so critical. So thanks for your time, and I'm here for questions. This is about free training, so if you want to scan this or go to vpculture.com, we have a 1-year free training for one of your people in your organization. So if you have a manager that needs to be upgraded, or if you're curious as an individual to see what VP Culture is about, there's free PDFs, there's other resources that we have there as well. An executive training for your executive team. If you think they need to be socialized into this idea, talk to us. Because I know it's like, I was all excited at this seminar, and they never heard it. So if you feel like your executive team needs to hear this, let me know, and I'd be happy to do that for you. All right, so thanks for your attendance. If you have any questions, I'll be up here, and thanks for your time.